time. Welcome to number 3 webinar. I'm actually going to mute everybody so that we can have some quiet for the introduction part. We're going to be talking about the Hermit Heartline today. And I just wanted to say I'm getting so excited, even more excited about this class because the year long, because I've been working on the materials and all these new pieces keep coming in. Every time I talk with someone who's interested in taking it, they're asking questions, go, oh, I need to include this and I need to make this happen. So it's an ongoing evolution process and I'm just making stuff up as we go, which makes me so completely happy. All right, so we're going to start talking about the Hermit Heartline today. Here we go. There we go. I'm going to move my people over to the other side of the screen. So, Hermit Heartlines today with Pamela Landers. Heartlines represent how you express your feelings. Your feeling style, your love style is another language that some people use. You know, there's a whole book on love styles. So that's what this Heartline represents, is the love styles that are in that book in different ways that people have them. It also expresses how you like to demonstrate or show or express love, how you want others to demonstrate it to you. Depending on what your Heartline types are, depends on how you want others to demonstrate, show, or express love to you. And it's how you demonstrate, show, and express love for others. And I have discovered that most people have more than one Heartline type. Very common to have a different one on your left hand than your right hand, or to have a split. We'll see an example of that. When I did a brief survey on this once, and I probably ought to do this again now that I have a way to make this happen easier than I used to, I found about 75% out of the 200 hands that I checked had different Heartline types on both hands. So I just thought that was fascinating. And I see it, classes and readings and things like that. There are 4 Heartlines. These are the 4 types. The first one is the big heart that's on this left side. It's curvy and straight. The curvy means it goes up and touches the index finger. It's not curvy and straight, it's curvy and long. And long means it goes to the Jupiter finger. It crosses this imaginary dotted line that's in between Saturn and Jupiter. That's what the big heart does. The romantic idealist is also long. It crosses this imaginary dotted line and goes into the Jupiter zone, but it's straight. So you can see these are both long Heartlines, but they're both straight Heartlines. These are not the Hermit. This is the passionate, which is short and curvy, and the reason it's short is because it doesn't cross this imaginary dotted line in between the fingers. It stays to the Saturn side of the finger, as does the Hermit. It stays to the Saturn side of the finger. So I use this dotted line as a way, when I'm looking at Heartlines that are kind of right on the border, as a way for me to determine whether or not they're short or long Heartlines. So the Hermit is short and straight. It doesn't cross this imaginary dotted line, and it's straight. So we're going to talk about what that means today. Here's another example, what I call a social Hermit, which means that it stays on this side of the dotted line. It curves up a little. It has a little more social energy than a normal Hermit does, but it doesn't go all the way up to the finger. So it doesn't qualify as a passionate, which goes all the way up. It's not long enough to be a big heart because it doesn't cross this dotted line. So it's a social Hermit. It gives a little more energy to the social part of the Hermit, brings in kind of the energy of whatever Heartline type it's reaching toward. but it still has all the hermit properties. And then here's one where it splits. This is the hermit split. So the hermit is the part where the heart line comes up to here before it splits. And then this one splits into a big heart and a romantic idealist. I see this probably somewhere around 15 to 20% of the people who come to me have some kind of split heart line. It can also, instead of going up to the big heart, it might go up to the passionate and have a little more curve. That's more rare. Passionate heart lines in general are more rare, so it's more rare to have that happen. This is the most common split that I see. I tell people who have this that they have 3 heart line types, and they do have the hermit as part of it. And the reason I'm sharing this today is because a number of people who may be watching this later or on the call have this experience, and they may not know that they also have a hermit, and they'll be wondering why they relate to what I'm talking about, but they've never been told they actually have hermit energy. Hermit is the earth element. This is the earth heart line. Some people talk about the heart lines only in terms of earth. So we have Mount Shasta here in the background, which is a little hard to see, and we have all these trees around here and hills and very earthy. The archetype for this is Clint Eastwood. When I learned how to read hands, the heart lines had people's names. When I wrote my book on heart lines in 2002, I first published it, I changed the names to descriptors because except for Clint Eastwood, most people don't even know who the other 3 archetypes are because they're not around very much. 2 of them are not around at all. I talk about that, but he's the archetype. Every one of his movies, if you ever see him interviewed, he totally acts like what we're going to be talking about today. So when you have a short heart line, it's me first. It's all about me, the self-focused. And the good news is that the short heart lines are very good at identifying what they want. They know what they want. The hermit's perspective is, because hermits tend to be reserved and cautious, which we're going to be talking about in a minute, they know what they want, but they don't often verbalize it. They take action. It's earthy. It's tangible. The earthy heart line tends to take really tangible action to get their needs met and their desires met. If you have multiple heart line types, this is only going to be true when the hermit's in charge. If you have hermits on both hands, then this is going to be true almost all the time in terms of how you express yourself. And of course, depends on what else is in the hands. That's a given no matter what. It always depends on what else is in the hands. Straight means cautious and reserved about sharing feelings. Straight heart lines, the curvy heart lines are really expressive and the straight ones are not. They're reserved. They're cautious. They're mostly uncommunicative unless they have something to say. They tend not to just babble for the sake of talking or feeling that they need to blurt things out unless there's something to say. Hermits, very specifically being the me first and self-focused and being reserved and cautious about sharing, are the most reserved, cautious, holding back heartline types, because they don't want anybody to use anything against them. They're really cautious about sharing their authentic feelings because they are afraid it's going to be used against them at some point. This is one of their life experiences. So they tend to hold back a lot on sharing their authentic and true feelings. We'll be bringing this in as we continue to talk about the hermit. So the biggest challenge for hermit is trust. This is the biggest student path issue we see for the hermit is trust. And it comes from having a strong sense of commitment and not trusting other people are going to live up to their commitments, or they experience, most people don't. Having a strong sense of loyalty and feeling like other people don't live up to their definition of loyalty, and so they can't trust them, and have a strong sense of integrity, which we will be talking more about today. So with that, those self-defined experiences of loyalty, commitment, integrity, hermits are often disappointed in other people's behaviors because other people who don't have heart lines don't understand what a big deal these things are for the hermit, or the hermit hasn't bothered to communicate their definition, so people don't have any clue why the hermit is behaving the way they are. And then what the hermit does is they close off their heart. This is one of their biggest challenges, is when they have an expectation of somebody else's behavior according to their definitions, and somebody doesn't meet it, then the immediate response is to not trust. It doesn't mean they don't trust anything. They don't trust that person on that topic. So for example, if you have a hermit who's really punctual, and about 80% of them are, about 20% of them don't value that as important, but for a lot of hermits show up early to things because they don't want to be late. It's like the worst thing in the world to be late for a lot of hermits, so they show up early. Their experience is that if somebody else is late, they must not be trustworthy to be on time. And if it happens more than twice, they're off the list. And sometimes a hermit will never even want to connect with them again on something where being on time is required. So trust becomes a really super important conversation for hermits. They may not always know this about themselves, but they live it. And again, if this is their only heartline type, this is a super big deal. If they have other heartline types, then this is there, but it may not be the only perspective of reality for relationship communication. And since it's so important, then in order for a hermit person to have a relationship with somebody else, they're going to know what they can trust and not trust early on. And they may make a decision. Like, I hear all these stories about dating, right? Nobody's talking about, oh, well, what are your hands and why isn't it working out? They're all talking about other stuff related to why men walk away or women walk away from relationships, or after they've dated a couple times, somebody disappears, and often the conversation is often about men disappearing. But what if the man has hermit heart lines and he's discovered early in the conversation that he can't trust that the woman's telling him the truth? He's not going to stay for that. He's out of there. Not going to work for him, right? Or she's late the second time and the first time. He's not going to tolerate that. He's not going to tell her. Hermits tend not to communicate what's going on for them unless they get mad. And then their anger is often their method of communicating. It's not always true. And again, it's going to depend on what else is in their hands. But from the hermit perspective, people should know. That's their view of reality. You should know that you're late. And I don't tolerate lateness, so you shouldn't be late. Like, people should know this. But they don't. And this is one of the hermit's challenges, is that they stop trusting people, but they don't always know why they're not trusting them. So that's one of the things that hermits are dealing with. Trust is a huge, 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 huge issue in a relationship. And as I was talking about people not following through on commitments, this is the other aspect of trust that shows up the most common way it shows up. People say they're going to do stuff and they don't do it. They're going to do the dishes before they go to bed and then they don't. They're going to take the garbage out and then they don't. They're going to deliver a document that you need in order to complete a project and they don't, because something else came up that's more important. And hermits don't understand that. It's like beyond their scope of comprehension to understand why people would make a commitment and then not follow through. Like, what? And the other three heartline types don't hold this trust thing as important as a hermit does. It's like such a primary focus for them, and everything kind of revolves around how the hermit is dealing with other people's living up to commitments or not, and trusting their word. Your word is your oath for a hermit. So they give their word and they don't follow through in their word. This is like How can I be in a relationship with people like this? So I'm just saying, if you're in the dating world, you're in a relationship, you have coworkers, you have bosses, you have children, you have hermits and they don't, this is going to be one of the major contention areas in the relationship. And if you don't talk about it and you don't communicate, or you don't let people know what your expectations are as a hermit, you're just going to constantly be disappointed in other people. And so then you get to do, in a work environment, all the work yourself. Isn't that fun? Other people aren't trustworthy, so I'm going to do it myself. It's kind of exhausting, but it's what happens. All right, so now we're going to talk about integrity, because this is like a major component, especially if you have your own business or want to have your own business. Integrity is going to be a super, 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 super point of view if you have at least one Hermit heartline, or you have it in the mix of other heartline types, because you are not going to trust anybody who's out of integrity. If you're a coach, or you're a hand analyst, or you are doing something where other people are being invited to go on a journey of self-discovery in some way, which I know a lot of you on this call are focused on that, whatever tool you're using, you have zero desire to work with people who don't stay in integrity. Zero desire. No interest at all. And you figure it out really early on. Because as a hermit, if you don't have hermit heartlines, this isn't that big a deal for you. But as a hermit, it's a very big deal. And you have integrity. You bring integrity to the table. And this is actually a really important selling point and marketing point. If you have a hermit heartline, is talking about how important integrity is to you, with you, for you, and with your clients. This is like, you want to create a law of attraction vibrational match with other people who have integrity. And people who don't follow through makes you crazy, and you don't understand what's wrong with these people who aren't following through with their choices, or their oath, or their word, or their commitments. Like, I don't get it. So integrity is huge, huge, huge to people with hermit heartlines in any relationship, but especially with clients. And if you bring that to the table, don't assume everybody gets it, because the other three heartline types, like I said, don't honor this in the same way that the hermits do. And you might want to only work with people who have at least one hermit heartline, or really earthy shaped hands, because other people are like, gonna make you nuts. You're gonna be frustrated. You're gonna think that there's something wrong with you if you don't weed out the people who are of integrity early on. And maybe you need to set up a system for you to be able to check that out with people, because it's going to be a big, big, big thing for you in your business world. So the trust issues, we're talking about trust issues. The trust issues that show up around integrity, not only the commitment piece of people not following through, but the integrity piece is people not acting in alignment with their word. They say one thing and they have a different behavior. That's a big integrity breach, right? So they, we see this a lot with politicians. When they're campaigning, they have all these promises that they never, ever get to, right? That's a really obvious experience that we have in our life here, especially in the US, really common. I don't know if it's true in all countries, but it's really a big common thing here. Or you see people in the movie business or the athletic business, right? The professional athletes, people that we know, we hear about them, they're in the media. And then we find out they have some breach of integrity behind the scenes. There's been, of course, the whole Me Too thing that's been going on that started on Facebook last year and got really to be a big movement. It's a huge integrity breach, right? The producers in Hollywood or the actors in Hollywood who are requiring sex in order for people to move ahead, or whatever it is that they're not requiring sex, but doing things like, taking off their clothes and exposing their penis for women who have no control over being in the room with it, right? So that's an integrity breach. It's an integrity breach, and doesn't have to be that extreme. But those are really obvious examples that we can all relate to. So an integrity breach could just be someone who is acting in some way that isn't consistent with the words that they're saying. Because for a hermit, your word is your oath. And if your word can't be relied on, then what can you rely on? You're going to rely on people's actions. And if their actions and words aren't in alignment, they're out of integrity. Just, it's like, how can you trust it? You can't. Hermits' primary need is freedom. This is a driving force for hermits, is their freedom. And they'll do anything to avoid feeling trapped, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But the freedom of choice, this is hermit's primary thing. And they want to be free to make choices to do things they want to do, when they want to do it, with the people they want to do it with. And it would be really important that they were trustworthy people. They will do anything to avoid feeling trapped. Anything to avoid feeling trapped. So one of the things that happens for hermits, if somebody invites them, like say, let's go to a concert next week and I'll get the tickets, but I want to make sure that you want to go to this concert. And the hermit's going, well, not sure I really like that particular band and I may want to do something else. So the hermit will procrastinate, it looks like, to everybody else and making the choice. But what the hermit's really doing is preserving their freedom and not getting trapped. If they initiate the conversation, no problem. But if somebody else initiates it and invites them to something they're not 100% committed to, then they're not necessarily going to be happy campers about following through on it because they may lose their freedom. If it's not their idea, they may feel like it's not okay to make that choice and they're going to lose their freedom. So they get judged a lot. Hermits get judged a lot for procrastinating. But what they're really doing is choosing to keep their freedom available to them at all costs because everything else is too costly. Big, 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 big issue for hermits. And if someone tries to force them into a choice or a decision, there's going to be a trust issue. Why can't you trust me that I know what I'm doing? And if you need to go buy tickets and you need to do it now, go do it. But I can't commit. I'm not going to commit. And sometimes if hermits can wait till the 2 minutes before they have to leave the house in order to go someplace that they're not sure whether or not they want to go when somebody invited them, they'll do that. They will wait till the very last minute to make a choice if they can, because they don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings and they want to maintain their freedom. It's a real big dilemma. And they don't talk a lot about how they feel most of the time, so you don't know what's going on. Unless you ask them specifically, are you on the fence about this particular event? Are you like 51-49? Are you more in the under 50% about attending? Are you more in the over 50%, but you have something else? So I recommend to hermits is to say, I'll get back to you. Because once they've committed, they have to go unless they're dead. So this is how serious commitments are for hermits. It's not true for the other three heartline types, but it's true for hermits. So once they make a commitment, they have to follow through. So they don't want to do that to something they're not sure about, so they're going to avoid feeling trapped. Okay, I see there are some comments in the chat, so I'm going to see what's going on here, and then I'm going to ask you to share stories. I have a big heart hermit split on both hands. Okay. My husband has hermit on both hands, plus a gifted healer. Yes. Michael and I also have a hermit on both hands and a gifted healer on both hands. Wonder how they play together. Well, it seems sometimes they play nicely and sometimes they don't. If the hermit's in charge, it may be tough. So I'd like to know more about that. Okay. So, do any of you have stories or questions or any examples that you can share to educate us all about what it's like to either have hermits or be in a relationship with somebody with hermits? I know you have stories, Michael, and I've heard them, but are you willing to share them?
I'm willing to share them. I doubt my husband would be willing to share them. So I'll be respectful of that. But say it can be a challenge, and I have big heart lines and some hermit energy as well. So we are opposites on the heart line spectrum. I think my husband's more advanced in communication because of his healer markings. He does have hermit tendencies. He's in politics. So he would probably say that he talks about truthfulness and integrity and honor because of the line of work that he's in. But you and I know that that's just the line of work that he found because I think he's, particularly sensitive to people in or out of integrity. So he tells stories about, the legislator who got busted doing this or that, and with scorn. And
yes,
yeah, it can be challenging as far as communication goes. I think we have stretched each other in both directions. We've been married for almost 24 years now. So I've migrated more towards the hermit side. Thankfully, I've added that to my abilities, and he's migrated towards my big heart side. And so we try to meet in the middle, and just the ability to talk about that with him, talk about the differences between our heartline styles, even just really recently, has been really powerful for both of us, because I can put into context, what's happening between us, or why there's a communication glitch in things that are going on with us.
That's good. That's a really valuable point, because knowing the different heartline types is so helpful in a relationship to understand where somebody else is coming from, what's motivating them, why they don't communicate the same way you do, why they have no interest in communicating the same way you do, and sometimes why they don't show you love the way you want to be loved because they're not motivated. Hermits are mostly not excited about touching unless there's a purpose to it. Where big hearts are like super, super affectionate, and they just touch because they want to. And so and they're opposites, and they are often connected. They often find each other in relationship. It's very common to find your opposite heartline type in relationship. And the hermit and the big heart are the opposites. So it's not uncommon that you would end up in, like you have, right? With the big heart and hermit. And you have to work those things out and not take it personally that, if you're really affectionate, that the other person's not, or whatever the issue is, and talk it through. So I'm glad you're sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. It's very...
Well, I will also say that I've been studying hands for over 6 years now, and it was one of the biggest game changers in our relationship is when I discovered heartlines. Because suddenly I stopped taking it personally, as you said, his tendency to not communicate and my tendency to over communicate, because I was able to see that when he brought me flowers, or when he changed the tire on my car, or when he picked up dinner because I was tired, I just translated that into "I love you," as if it were words. And suddenly there was all of this love in our relationship that had always been there, but I wasn't seeing it before.
Right.
And when I could see it, it was a real, it was just so satisfying. It just really, really felt good. I felt like I became bilingual.
Yeah, there you go. That's such a great conversation. Yes. Learning how to speak somebody else's love language is bilingual. That's great. It's important for a relationship success. When I first wrote my book on heart lines, the first publication of it in 2002, my passion about writing this book not only was heart lines, like my favorite part of hands that I learned in the first weekend I was learning hands, but I just thought if everybody knew what their heart line types were, it would help everybody's relationship. And they'd have so much better communication if they could have space for other people's heart line types. But everybody didn't see it that way. I don't know why. I don't know what's wrong with these people. Everybody doesn't want better communication in their relationships, but some people don't. So it didn't sell to the entire world. So, yeah, I'll respond to your request in a minute, Ellen. So this also, the other thing I wanted to bring up in response to what you were saying, Michael, is it's really important to understand your heartline type so you can explain it to other people who matter in your life. You can tell them what motivates you. You can tell them how you want love expressed, whether or not they can do it. But they can understand then, okay, so when you're not expressing love in this one particular way, then, oh, I get it. So you have that heartline type and I have this one, and I really want to be touched in affection because I have a big heart. And the hermit's going, not so much, not so much, right? So it's that kind of understanding about the differences makes a huge difference in relationships, working and not working. Just if you just knew the heartline, it would make a big difference. Debbie.
I was thinking, because I have the split Hermit and Donna heartline. So,
which is a big heart for the people here who
big
don't
heart,
know that.
sorry, yeah,
Yes.
the big heart and the Hermit. But so that's the push me, pull me. But at this moment, what flashed through my head is that when I'm not getting the connection needs met, the Hermit part of me understands that and is okay with it. But you know what I mean? So there's this inner thing like, it's no big deal. But it is a big deal. So there's this inner tug of war going on. But I just, in this moment, realized, well, of course it's because both sides work for me. But it really, until the buildup of not enough connection happens, you know what I mean? Will the Hermit in me speak up? I mean, it's an interesting thing that just went through my head. So,
yeah, yes, exactly. And yes, when you have both opposite heartline types like you do, not uncommon, that's the most common combination I see is big hearts and hermits together on somebody's hands, same hand or opposite hands, then yes, both parts need their needs met.
Right.
Where's the balance? And which one are you in at any particular moment?
Right. Right. And not, and having to stay in integrity with honoring which side's not getting met, because I'm married to myself in a way. You know what I mean? So it's interesting with my husband, because he's kind of got a chameleon heart line, multiple lines. So which part of him am I speaking to at the moment?
Right, exactly. Which is the other thing that happens with multiple heart lines. You don't know which heartline type you're necessarily getting in the moment.
Right.
Yikes. Or they don't know what part of you,
yeah,
if you have multiple heartline types, they're getting. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's so poignant and it's so accurate. Debbie also is a hand analyst, so she knows from definition and experience. All right. So Ellen was asking the question of, have I noticed a relationship between the heart lines and the 5 love languages? Yes, I have noticed it. I can't remember what the love languages are, but I noticed, I know one of them has to do, and yes, Anna, I can do that. One of them has to do with giving gifts, right? Which would be a very hermity thing to do because hermits show love by doing things. Oh, touch, acts of service, time, and gifts. So the touch would be like the big heart. The big heart loves to touch, and as does the passionate. That's not true for the romantic idealist and the hermit. The gifts would be a very hermity thing to do because they show up by doing things and giving people physical things as a way, because it's action oriented, right? Words would be a very passionate experience. Word and big hearts both actually need to express how they feel. They need to express, so they have to talk. And big hearts need the connection that comes through the conversation. Passionates usually just want to share something, and they're not necessarily interested all the time in the discussion about stuff, but the big heart is. The big heart wants a two-way conversation, so words are very, very important to the big heart. Let me go back and look. Acts of service, that could be the romantic idealist, and the big heart could both do acts of service, but more the romantic idealist, because the big heart tends to do everything themselves. Well, definitely acts of service. They have a big receiving issue. And time, big hearts and romantic idealists want time with other people. So it's not a direct correlation. There's it's a broader spectrum than that. But yeah, that's my experience. It's more, the heart lines are a little bit more complex than the 5 love languages. And so Anna was asking about the social hermit. The social hermit, if it goes towards the big heart, then it's going to take on big heart tendencies. If it goes towards the passionate, it's going to take on passionate tendencies. So it depends on the curve, and I have multiple examples of this that we'll be going through in the class. It depends on the curve of the line, whether it's more big heart or more passionate. I have some examples where the heart line is curving a lot passionate, but it doesn't get up close enough to the finger. It stays in the hermit zone, but it doesn't get close enough to the finger to be considered a passionate. But it has the passionate tendencies, but it still has all the hermit stuff going on too. So they can adopt themselves to be in either the big heart or the passionate style of relationship if they need to. That's what a social hermit does, is they have an adaptation quality that a straight hermit doesn't like to adapt. They see no point in it unless they have other heartline types. You're welcome. You have both hermits, one going towards passion, the other towards big heart. So there you go. That's kind of like having 3 heartline types. Having social hermits that go to different places is kind of the similar thing of having 3 heartline types. It's fascinating. Good. Glad it was helpful. So, yeah. I could spend an entire weekend just talking about hermit heartlines, because to me, they have the most depth of any of the heartline types, and they have the most different types of qualities. All the heartline types have stuff going on, and I, can spend a lot of time talking about the other heartline types, but hermits have layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of stuff. And it's often hidden because it's a hermit. And people don't see it unless they're paying a lot of attention to action. Don't see it a lot. So hermits hide out from being exposed and vulnerable most of the time. Although when I was taking my year-long in 1991 to 92, there was a gal in our class who had double hermits. And during lunch, she talked non-stop. And I said, Richard, what is this? And he said, it's the chatty Cathy. So she wouldn't talk about her feelings. She talked about activities, and she talked about other stuff. And she wouldn't really get into feeling conversation, but it was a way to control the environment so nobody got into uncomfortable feeling conversations. And that was quite an eye-opener for me. So sometimes when people talk a lot and there's no space for somebody else, they can either be a passionate or a hermit. The hermits are motivated by, I don't want to get into anything too emotional because I am very embarrassed about sharing my feelings and I don't want anybody to use them against me. I don't want to cry in public, so I don't want anybody to use them against me. Because then someone will know I'm really actually super sensitive, which hermits can be. They feel things very, very deeply. They just don't want to talk about it. None of your business. None of your business how I'm feeling. And especially if I don't trust you, because then you'll use it against me. And then I'm going to never trust you to tell you anything ever again. That's what they do. But boy, are they reliable. They give their word. They are going to follow through as long as it's really clear what the agreement is. If the agreement's not really clear, they're going to do something else. Because if they think you're not as committed as they are, if it's not an equal commitment, they're out of there. Like, why would I spend my time focused on something where there's not equal commitment and I'm not going to get it back in the same measure that I'm giving it? Boop. I'm going to go do something else. So they're really fascinating, like all of us, very fascinating beings. All right, I'm just briefly, since all of you have been on the other calls and have access to the webinars, know that I am teaching the year-long, and if anybody's watching this who hasn't seen the other two webinars, all of the information about the year-long is on those pages, those other two webinars about starting in May. Depending on who's in the class will depend on what time the class starts. I'm talking with people now who are expressing interest and finding out who wants to be in the class. So don't rule it out if 4:30 in the afternoon on Thursday doesn't work. Talk to me if you want it at a different time, because I'm not committed to doing that yet, because I haven't for sure know who's going to be in the class. So don't hesitate. If you have any questions, please email me at Pamela with an H, PamelaLanders.com, Pamela@PamelaLanders.com, or if you have my Pamela Landers at AOL, you can use that one, which I read more often because it's on my phone. So it's every Thursday night or day, depending on what we end up doing, for 2 hours. That's it. Only 2 hours a week. It's much easier to get all the content to stay with you if you don't have to remember too much stuff. Plus, there are going to be readings in every single class. Somebody will be reading somebody, if not multiple people reading, depending on what content we're covering. I will need your handprints because we're going to be looking at your hands to see what markings you have based on what conversation we're having. And I realized by talking with somebody today who has not been trained in the fingerprint system that in the beginning, the first 4 sessions, we're going to be doing sort of universal conversation, things that are universal to the hands. I'm actually going to be doing a quick review on fingerprint geometric shapes. I'm not going to be talking about what anything means because we'll be doing that as we go through the year long. But some people don't know how to identify purpose and lesson. So we're going to have a brief review on that. It's not complicated. The hardest part of fingerprints is what do they mean. Identifying them isn't that complicated. They're geometric shapes. It's just memorizing them. And yeah, I have materials in print that you'll be getting, so there'll be no excuse to not get it if you actually pay attention to the materials. And this is a class, if you want to be certified, you can. It's not required. Most people in the past, and it may not be true now, but most people in the past who have taken the year-long from any teacher do it for personal growth. Not a lot of people who take the year-long go into hands as a business or a full-time business. They use it as part of something else. Or they just are happy to be learning about themselves. They look at it as a personal growth thing because it's so accurate and so deep and so immediate. So there are multiple reasons why people participate. And you don't have to want to be certified, but if you do, that's going to be an option. So any questions or comments about the year-long? All right, I'm going to go back to one more conversation about the Hermit heart lines. No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go to the beginning. Oh, technology makes me a little crazy. One of my great joys in life. Dealing with technology. All right, we're going to go here. All right, then we're going to go back to this is where we were. So, slow to change. This is an earth property. Slow to change. This is Sedona, the Red Mountains of Sedona. Safety and security are motivating the slow to change aspect of the Hermit. And here's why. Earth energy needs other elements to make it change. If you had just dirt sitting out, if there were no wind, it would never move. If there were no water, nothing would ever happen. It would just sit there, right? It would just sit there. So Earth needs other elements to make it move. And the slow to change piece is there because safety and security are driving the Hermit. Hermits want to feel safe and secure every step of the way, which is one of the reasons they don't want people to be out of integrity. Or why they have trust issues is because that's not very secure. People aren't reliable. That's not secure. There's no safety and lack of reliability. There's no security in that. So if you had like someone who was a handyman who was putting in California, for example, putting shelves up in a garage because of all the earthquake possibilities, right? They'd have to be taking that into account. Then they would make sure, a hermit person would make sure that these shelves were really solidly connected to the wall, that they were safely set and they were securely set. So a handyman with Hermit heart lines, trust them to make sure they're doing a really safe and secure job. And they may be overly safe and secure according to what you want, but they couldn't live with themselves if they didn't do that. They don't want somebody else to get harmed because they screwed up in some way and didn't create safety and security. They just can't live with themselves. So it takes them longer to make changes and to adapt because they have to make sure they're going to be safe. Just because you're telling them it's okay doesn't mean they know that. That's just blah, 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 unless the actions follow through. And you know that for sure that that's happening. So this is a huge issue for hermits, is the safety and security piece. And they are resentful of people who try to push them too fast. They don't like it. They will push against you. They'll clam up. They'll stop being in relationship with you on that topic if you're pushing them to try to do something ready before they're ready to change. And this is major for hermits. And it comes back to the whole trust thing too. Can they trust that the next step is the next step? It's not step 3. Hermits are great at taking only the next step because it's one of my experiences of life. One of the things I've been talking about for, 16, 17 years, that you can only take the next step because you have all the resources for the next step. You don't have resources for the step beyond that yet. So you can only take the next step, and hermits are really good at role modeling, only taking the next step because they don't want to do anything that's going to not be safe and secure. And you can't know if it's going to be safe and secure if you don't know if all the resources are there. Now, there could be other things in their hands that make that different. I just have to say that again and again and again, right? They could have other things in their hands that they take risks, but the hermit part of them is like, I don't think so. Safe, 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 secure, 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 driving force. All right. Any comments or questions about that, or stories or examples, or? Nobody? Okay. That's all I had prepared today. Are there any other in general comments or questions or anything? Let's see. I can see why I'm suspicious then with double hermits. Yes. You could be super suspicious of everybody. Other heartline types don't get the hermit's need for the safety and security because they are not driven by that. There are other elements. They're water, air, or fire. Security, the fire heartline, the passionate security. What are you talking about? That doesn't mean anything to me. Let's just go take a risk. Let's just go do something. I just want to go do this. Okay. So are we complete? Any other comments or questions? Nope. Yes. Pamela, I just sent you an email. Okay. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you all. And this is the end of our free webinars for now. So
Thanks, Pamela.
you're so welcome. My pleasure. I'm happy to share. And thank you for being here so I have an audience to talk with.
Always
All right.
learning.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.